Imagine you're walking through a dense, primeval forest in East Africa. It's 100,000 years ago. The air is heavy with the scent of damp earth, crushed eucalyptus, and wood smoke. You're moving slowly, deliberately, because you have to. There are things in the shadows of these trees that would love nothing more than to make a quick meal out of you. And then, out of nowhere, the quiet is absolutely shattered. It's a high-pitched, relentless, piercing scream. You look down, and nestled in a bundle of softened animal hide against your chest is a human newborn. It is red-faced, incredibly fragile, and crying at the top of its lungs. To any passing predator, a prehistoric leopard, a giant hyena, or a pack of cursorial hunting dogs, this sound isn't just noise. It is an acoustic beacon. It is a highly loud, highly repetitive announcement saying, "Hey, look over here! There is a completely defenseless, highly delicious snack sitting right in the open." And as you desperately try to quiet this tiny screaming creature in the dark, a genuinely baffling question should start to itch at the back of your mind. How on earth did our species survive this? No, seriously. Think about that for a second. In the ruthless, uncompromising arena of evolutionary history, human babies are a complete design disaster. If you look at almost any other mammal on the planet, their infants are born ready to roll. A baby wildebeest hits the savanna dust, shakes off the amniotic fluid, and is running at 30 miles an hour with the herd within 45 minutes. A baby chimpanzee, our closest living cousin, can cling to its mother's fur from the very second it is born, leaving her hands entirely free to climb trees, forage for fruit, and escape danger. But a human baby? A human baby is basically a semi-sentient, highly fragile potato. They can't walk, they can't crawl, they can't even hold their own heads up. They can't cling to us because we got rid of our thick body fur millions of years ago. They are entirely, aggressively useless. If you leave a human baby alone in the wild for even a few hours, it dies. And to make matters worse, they scream. They scream when they're hungry, they scream when they're cold, they scream when they're slightly uncomfortable, and they scream when they just feel like screaming. This is the story of how our ancestors solved the ultimate evolutionary paradox, raising the most fragile, high-maintenance, predator-attracting offspring in the entire animal kingdom, without strollers, without formula, without white noise machines, and without a nursery. And why the highly isolated way we try to do it today might be completely gaslighting our biology. To understand how we pulled this off, we first have to look at why babies are like this in the first place. Why did evolution, which is usually so incredibly practical, hand us such a raw deal? It all comes down to a biological compromise that anthropologists call the obstetrical dilemma. Roughly 6 million years ago, our ancestors started doing something highly unusual for primates. We stood up and started walking on 2 legs. To make bipedalism work, evolution had to radically reshape our skeletons, narrowing and rotating the pelvis to support our upright weight. But then, our ancestors' brains started absolutely exploding in size. We went from having brains the size of an orange to brains the size of a grapefruit, and eventually, the size of a small melon. And this is where the biological car crash happened. You have a species trying to pass an increasingly massive head through a birth canal that has been narrowed and tightened for upright walking. If a human baby stayed in the womb until its brain was actually mature, say the biological equivalent of a baby chimp or gorilla, pregnancy would have to last about 21 months. But by month 9, the baby's head is already at the absolute limit of what a female pelvis can physically pass without killing both the mother and the infant. So, evolution made a deal. It decided to kick the baby out early. Biologically speaking, every single human baby is born premature. Anthropologists often refer to the first 3 months of a baby's life as the 4th trimester. A newborn human isn't a fully baked infant. It's a fetus that has to finish its basic development on the outside. Their brains are only about 25% of their adult size at birth. They are soft, unfinished, and completely exposed. And this leads us to the first major hurdle of ancient parenting, the cry. If you have ever been around a modern baby, you know the absolute, heart-stopping panic that happens when you put them down in a crib and walk away. They scream as if they are being actively tortured. For decades, parenting books, especially in the mid-20th century, told parents to just let them cry it out. They said the baby was manipulating them or trying to assert dominance. Honestly, respect to the authors, but that is complete nonsense. A newborn baby does not have the cognitive architecture to manipulate you. They don't know what a house is. They don't know that they are safe in a carpeted, insulated room in suburbia. When you put a baby down on a flat, motionless surface and walk away, their ancient, deeply wired evolutionary brain registers one thing and one thing only. I am alone, I am immobile, and therefore, I am about to be eaten by a predator. In the wild, a silent baby is a living baby. but a lonely baby has to scream to make sure its protectors haven't forgotten it. There's actually a fascinating physical proof of this hidden in modern babies today. It's called the Moro reflex, or the startle reflex. If you hold a newborn baby and gently let their head drop back slightly, their arms will shoot out to the sides, fingers splayed, and then they will pull their arms back in as if they are trying to hug something. Why do they do this? Because for millions of years, if our ancestors' babies felt themselves falling, they had to instantly grab onto their mother's body fur to survive. The fur is gone, but the panic remains. So how did ancient humans keep their babies close, safe, and quiet while still doing the daily, exhausting work of survival? They wore them. You will almost never see an ancient baby sling in an archaeological museum because they were made of organic materials, leather, woven plant fibers, animal skins, which rot and dissolve back into the earth long before an archaeologist can find them. But many anthropologists argue that the invention of the baby sling was a far more important technological leap for our species than the invention of the wheel or the control of fire. The moment an ancient mother figured out how to tie a piece of softened leather or a vine around her torso to hold her infant against her chest, everything changed. Suddenly, she had her hands free. She could walk miles to gather tubers, grind seeds, carry firewood, and keep her infant physically attached to her body. And here's what we know about babies who are worn. They barely cry. When a baby is held against a moving body, their heart rate slows down, their cortisol levels drop. The constant, rhythmic motion of their parents' gait acts as a natural pacifier. Ancient babies were carried almost 24 hours a day, either by their mothers or by other members of the group. But carrying a growing baby for miles every day is exhausting. And this brings us to the real secret weapon of human survival. It's called alloparenting. If you look at our closest relatives, the great apes, chimpanzee mothers are incredibly solitary. A chimp mother will not let anyone, not her sisters, not her friends, not even the father, touch her newborn baby for the first several months of its life. She does everything alone. If human mothers tried to do this, our species would have gone extinct a long time ago. The energy required to grow a massive human brain and feed a helpless child is simply too high for a single mother to manage on her own. So we evolved a different strategy. We became what biologists call cooperative breeders. In every hunter-gatherer society ever studied, child-rearing is a team sport. It is not a maternal monopoly. The famous phrase, "it takes a village to raise a child," is not a modern, feel-good cliché. It is a literal, hardwired biological requirement of our species. Anthropologists have documented this beautifully. In hunter-gatherer groups like the EFA of Central Africa, a newborn baby is passed around to other women almost immediately after birth. By the time a hunter-gatherer baby is 3 weeks old, it spends up to 40% of its day being held, carried, and cared for by alloparents, which means grandmothers, aunts, older siblings, and trusted friends. Nearly half of the baby's life is supported by a network of collective care, and this cooperative model left a deep, physical record in our biology. Let's talk about menopause. In the animal kingdom, menopause is an absolute freak show. Almost every other female animal on Earth remains fertile until the day she dies. From an evolutionary perspective, if you can't reproduce, you are evolutionary dead weight. Why spend resources keeping an animal alive if it can't make more of itself? But human females are different. We are one of the only species on Earth, alongside killer whales and a few other select marine mammals, that experience menopause. A human woman can easily live 30, 40, or 50 years after her reproductive system shuts down. Why did evolution do this? It's called the grandmother hypothesis. It turns out that an older woman's genetic survival is actually better served not by having more babies of her own, which becomes increasingly dangerous as she ages, but by keeping her existing children and grandchildren alive. Grandmothers in ancient societies were the ultimate survival secret. Because they weren't tied down by nursing their own newborns, they could spend all day foraging for high-nutrient foods and handing them directly to their grandchildren, dramatically dropping infant mortality rates. But alloparenting didn't just keep our bodies alive, it actually built our minds. To let someone else hold your fragile, useless baby, you have to do something that chimpanzees cannot do. You have to trust them. And to be a good alloparent, you have to be able to read the baby's mind. You have to look at this tiny, non-verbal creature and think, are they crying because they're cold, or because they're hungry, or because they're scared? This constant daily exercise of shared attention and mutual trust forced our ancestors' brains to develop a highly sophisticated capacity for empathy. Our capacity for deep social connection, for reading facial expressions, for cooperative communication. The very things that make us human didn't evolve on the hunting grounds. They evolved in the nursery. We are who we are because we learned to share our babies. Now, let's bring this back down to earth, to our modern lives, because this is where the picture gets incredibly complicated and honestly, a little bit heartbreaking. For 99% of human history, A new mother was never alone. She was surrounded by sisters, mothers, grandmothers, and friends who had been holding babies since they were children themselves. There was no such thing as a mother sitting alone in a quiet room, struggling with postpartum depression, wondering if she was doing it right, while her partner worked a 9-to-5 job miles away. The modern nuclear family, this idea that a single couple, or worse, a single parent, should be entirely responsible for the physical, emotional, and financial well-being of a human infant inside a closed, isolated house, is a completely bizarre, highly recent historical anomaly. We have dismantled the village, but our biology doesn't know that. Our babies still expect to be held 24 hours a day. They still expect a chorus of familiar voices and faces to soothe them. Our mothers still expect a physical network of support to carry the load when they are exhausted. And when we try to force ourselves into this hyper-isolated, modern way of parenting, and it feels impossibly hard, we think there is something wrong with us. We think we are failing. But you're not failing. You're just trying to raise a cooperative, ancient primate in a system that was designed for factories, not families. So, next time you see a parent struggling with a crying baby in a grocery store, or next time you feel completely overwhelmed by the relentless demands of a child, remember that thin thread of continuity. Remember that you were never built to do this alone. Your ancestors survived because they looked at the most fragile, useless creature in the world, and instead of running away from the noise, they reached out their hands, passed the baby around the fire, and decided to carry the weight together.